Hi, my name is David Basch. I am a film producer, among other things, and I produced a movie, My Brother, starring Vanessa Williams and Tatum O'Neal a few years back. And the movie was made with the idea that another movie would be made afterwards called The Messiah's Complex, about the effects of media and mass communication on civilization throughout history, and especially what we're going through right now. One of the most amazing aspects of communication is that people think that whatever media it's in, it does not affect the message itself. However, that is completely untrue. One of the most amazing parts of history, what we call medieval history, began because of a little invention called the Gutenberg press, which basically gave the ability for everybody to read and write, and that changed Christianity forever. From being a monolithic religion, which only the aristocracy and the bishops knew how to read the Bible and then interpret it for their parish, to each and every individual human being having the ability to read the Bible and give it its own interpretation, thereby creating an atmosphere which we would have thought would be wonderful, but instead we had mass murder and torture, with each person and each group thinking that their interpretation of the Bible is correct, and therefore they were willing to die and kill for it and torture for it. So the media changing, the ability of human beings to understand something differently through a medium that they never had before, that is to say to read and to write, changed who they are and the way they are. We are now undergoing an even more massive revolution, which began simply with radio about 100 years ago, evolved into television, and finally now evolved into internet, where the total sum knowledge and history of humanity has been concentrated in something about this size. Not only can I read from this little device, write with this little device, I can communicate with anybody in the world with this little device, and any knowledge and history of the world by merely putting in that name, be it Jesus Christ or Moses or Hitler, I have the knowledge all concentrated, the entire history of mankind, the knowledge of mankind, into one little teeny weeny little area. The effects of that are unknown, what it's doing to us. We are changing dramatically, but we are not seeing it. I'm sitting at a hotel at the Cannes Film Festival, where I'm basically completely ignored because I'm neither famous nor that pretty. However, they do have my knowledge. They have, that is to say, they know my room number, they have my ID, that is to say my passport, which is another numerical way of identifying me, and finally my credit cards, which again is numerical. And as long as they have those numbers, we can continue to have a relationship, and they leave me in this hotel and give me some services. So it's a very different world from the Gutenberg press, where people still have to know each other's names and have some sense of relationship, of family, of contact. Today, it's all image and numbers, and it's all possible to be done and moved around thanks to the media change. So this change in media has really created a thought process that is unique to humanity, and we are not aware of it. As I say, when these revolutions occur, we do not really know the meaning of it until hundreds and sometimes thousands of years later, what it did and how it did it. One of the major occurrences prior to the Gutenberg press was simply writing, that is to say, written history. Written history begins when we discovered how to write. However, when we go into pre-written history, all we have is archaeologists and digs, and what it tells us about humanity pre-written history is very interesting. All statues pre-written history are of women. There are no statues of men. Apparently it was an area and at a time when women were in control and were worshipped, and men were subjugated to women. To this very day, the Pope wears a robe. To this very day, the Imam wears a robe, because I believe initially in the Middle East, it was the goddess who was interpreted by the priestess, by women, and then finally men. So the relationship between male and female was very different than what we know today. It was a matriarchal relationship, whereas we, most of us in this country and probably across the world, were born into what's called patriarchies. The Judeo-Christian, Muslim religions, all of which are patriarchal. It goes from one man to the next man, the inheritance of wealth and power. It has begun to change, and the change is not a coincidental one, I believe. As soon as we leave writing, and now we are moving to visual mediums, female domination begins. And so This is a massive revolution which is taking us by storm, happening so quickly, impossible for any average human being to absorb all the knowledge and information that is coming at us. And so I felt that it is very important to make a movie to focus our attention on reality and what is in fact happening in reality. Simplest ideas like God are interpreted in many, many different ways. A Muslim sees God one way, a Jew another, a Christian a third, and even within these groups there are subgroups that do not agree with each other at all. So our mere grasp of reality, whether there is a God, there isn't a God, what that means, our value systems, how we treat each other, the most rudimentary things are under challenge right now in our world. Yet, the big corporations are making movies about Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, and really not focusing our attention on what is really, really relevant, which is the communication revolution itself and how that affects who we are and reality. And what we now know about ourselves is very, very different than what we knew even a few years ago. So I believe that the Messiah's complex is the beginning of that process. That is to say, to bring together the Jews, the Muslims, the Christians, and really in the same way that we have a united nations, have a united religions. That is to say, a united attempt to see what the value system of humanity ought to be. On the surface, the Messiah complex is a movie about Dryden, who is a fat man who thinks he is the Messiah and speaks all the dead languages. He believes he knows things that nobody else knows. That's why he is the Messiah. However, he is fat and is ignored. But he wins the lottery to the world's most famous fat camp called the Island of Eating Disorders, where only the richest, most powerful people can afford to go. And when he gets there, he discovers that Professor Zenon, who is the leader of the island, in fact has surveillance cameras everywhere and has a group of surrogate women whose job it is to increase the sexual self-confidence of men as they're losing weight. But she has her own ideas. Her name is Lilith, and she has begun the process of revolution of turning the island over to the women's control. That is to say, that women will be in control of the island and begin the process of women taking over control of the world. It is very important to understand that all of this is a metaphor, but it is also very important to understand that all of this is actually happening in many ways throughout the world and throughout civilization. Much of the threat towards Islam, whose women are covered up from head to toe, is an awareness of how powerful women are visually, as well as Jews, as well as Christians, and the shift in power is part of the quake that's happening, I believe, subconsciously in our civilization that we are not aware of, and creating enormous problems. Marriage is at a 60% rate of divorce. There is no institution that has not been affected by this evolution or revolution in communication.